Well, hello guys. Welcome back. Today we have got one of the OGs of the hair loss community, Mr. Spencer Kobren. Spencer, how you doing?
Brother, thank you so much for wanting to do this. And it's when I think of one of the OGs, it's like I am probably the oldest of the OGs. That's what's frightening about this whole situation. It's great to be here, brother.
Absolutely. So I think best thing to start with is where it all began. What's your story? How did it all start?
Well, I think it kind of started like your story, but except my story started in 1987. I was at a New Year's Eve party. Drove to my brother's place. He was living in Washington, D.C. from New York. And I'm like looking at my hair as I'm styling my hair. I had this really long hair. It was 1987.
Hmm.
I'm like, something looks weird. And I asked my brother, I said, does my hair look different? He goes, yeah, I think I see a little skin. And that was it, brother. I was off to the races. My life had changed from that point on. Um,
It's always that one moment. It's always that one moment. I had the exact same thing. Like I was on a trip to France, and I remember looking. It was a pretty intense overhead lighting, and I could see all the way through my scalp. And I was like, I swear I've never seen that before. I swear I've never seen that.
the stomach drop that you feel from that, it's something that is inexplicable to anyone who hasn't dealt with it.
Yeah,
When, when you when you
literally.
when you're listening to these like guys online who are saying just shave it, bros, these guys, they have no idea. I mean, for the most part, unless they're too far gone, they've shaved it and they've
Yeah.
moved on. But it is, as a young person, if you haven't suffered some sort of a significant illness,
Mm.
this is probably the most traumatic thing
Yeah.
that has ever happened in your young life. And
Yeah.
I can't overemphasize that reality. So
It's
that's how
true.
it started with me. I was about 21 years old. I had this incredible long hair. I was always being complimented for my hair. So when that's kind of part of your identity, it hits you very hard. Like it hits anybody hard, but that was like part of my identity in that at that point in my life. I was just kind of
Mm.
coming into my own. I just started my own business around 19 years old. I was a young entrepreneur. Everything was going great. I was, you know, I was enjoying like being, I was going out with women, but not being tied down to anybody, just enjoying that part of my life, going to the bars, all that stuff. And then I'm hit in the back of the head with a 2x4 by hair loss. So for me, my first inclination was to do as much research as possible and find out what was going on. You have to understand this is before Rogaine was approved by the FDA. There was nothing on the market that actually worked for hair loss, nothing being advertised. Back in those days, there were infomercials. You would see stuff in the back of like muscle magazines or on the sports pages. I was living in New York at the time. Um, So you bought all the products that you saw in the infomercials. And I have to say, just to be clear, not much has changed. Everything, almost everything you see online, 99% of product services, it doesn't matter if it has the word exosomes in it or whatever, it's complete nonsense. Will not help you with your hair loss. So not much has changed since 1987, except now you actually have medications that work. But I didn't even have what you guys had. So I went
Mm.
through all of it. I mean, I hung upside down with gravity boots, put cayenne pepper on my head, listened to every wives' tale. I was making like witch's brews of, stuff I saw. I was reading in books about, these herbal supplements, not supplements, but herbs to put in like these tonics. And it was nuts, man. Um, and I got to the point where I was researching the hair club. They were trying to sell me a wig, which I had a full head of hair, and they would not tell me what they were trying to sell me at the time. So I broke this lady down. I mean, she was trying to sell me this for an hour, like this hot woman saying, you're a handsome kid, boy, whatever, young man, and you, you don't want to lose your hair and all this stuff, and really preying on my vulnerability. And she was just hot, like, had this rack and just like they knew exactly how to do it. I was lucky. I brought a girlfriend in at the time, who I was going out with, and they took this Polaroid, believe it or not, that's how old I am, picture of the top of my head
Right.
with this big flash. And my girlfriend at the time looked at it and she goes, "That's not your head." I don't know how they did that. She wasn't the smartest tool in the shed, by the way, because it was a flash. but I looked a lot like I had a lot less hair. Because I had no
Yeah.
real visible bald spots. Anyway,
Yeah.
I broke this woman down. They finally brought this guy in who had this very obvious wig on. And I'm like,
Mm.
"That's a wig." And like, "Well, it's a strand by strand system and no one will know you have it and you want to do it early." Anyway, I walked out of that place. She probably still talks about me to this day. And then I went to see all the hair transplant guys. The biggest guy in the field at the time was Norman Orenreich. I lived in New York City, so I got an appointment on Park Avenue. It was like $250 at the time just to see this guy. And he sat me down. And he said, "Look, if you were my own son, I would tell you to try a few hair transplants and see if you like them." Like, what does that mean to try a few hair transplants? And back then, there were 4 millimeter plugs they would have had to take from the back of my head, put it into non-balding areas, by the way. So I would have had horns, 4 millimeter plugs sticking out of my head if I would have said yes. And trust me, so many guys said yes who ended up calling my show, 10 years later,
Yeah.
whose lives were destroyed. So that was my initial experience. Besides buying every product and service on the market and trying everything, and going through the depression. I was not a drinker at the time. Like I would go to bars, but I wasn't really a drinker until I started to
Yeah.
lose my hair. And then I started to like self-medicate, went through the depression of it all. People
Mm.
noticed that I was changing. I mean, I had to go to work, and I had my own business, so I had to function. But even, my girlfriend at the time, we broke up because of it. And then I would just end up going with, these random women just to kind of prove to myself that I was still in the game.
Yeah.
And my hair just got crunchier and crunchier. Essentially, I had a similar hairstyle as I do now, but I was 21, 22 years old with the hairspray. It was getting nuts.
Yeah.
So it was devastating to me. So when I just decided to do my research, and when I did all my research, I realized this industry is incredibly dangerous. There's nothing that could help you until I found. Well, let me backtrack. Around 1988, about a year in, I found the doctor who was compound. I'm sorry, 1987. I was compounding. I get my years mixed up. It's so long ago. I was getting a
Yeah.
compounded minoxidil and tretinoin with like a SD alcohol base. Rogaine was not approved yet, but I did get my hands on this product, and I think it slowed things down. It was working for me for a while. Fast forward to 1994, this is all I had with these minoxidil products. Things were slipping, things were not good. So I was still doing research and still not feeling great about myself. Read an article in the New York Times about finasteride that was already approved in 92 for benign prostate hyperplasia. And one of the side effects were these guys were growing their hair back. So they were going to test it for hair loss. That's all I needed to know. Took this article, brought it to a doctor that I knew, told him to look up the drug. He looked it up. At least at the time, it was one of the safest drugs prescribed in the physician's desk reference, which here in the States is like the main doctor book for all drugs.
Mm.
So he said, "Yeah, you want to give it a try? I'll prescribe it." And the rest is history. I got on that medication, and it motivated me to write my first book and really present my experiences and also the reality and expose to expose this industry for what it was. And
Mm.
I was lucky enough to sell it, and then that got me on the radio, and that's kind of how I started.
It's pretty. It's pretty incredible because that means you are essentially one of the first ever people most likely to be on finasteride specifically for hair loss.
I would say that there were obviously, besides the guys in the trials, and maybe a handful of people who I found online later, but they were really older guys who were taking it for their prostates who noticed it. I
Yeah.
may have been one of the first, maybe the first 50, who specifically focused on the indication of hair loss to take this
Yeah.
medication and who was willing to take that risk. Because at the time, even though my doctor said he felt it was safe, there was still concerns about older prostate medications that were really feminizing men, and this was a new
Yeah.
prostate medication.
Yeah. And how did you feel at the time when obviously, you know, you were taking a medication that pretty much no one else was using for that specific cause? Like,
Dude, when you're in your 20s, I would if someone had handed me like a pill in a bar, if it was a button, I would have swallowed it. I didn't care at all, you know? I mean, this wasn't something that you thought about, especially that time in the world.
yeah,
The internet it didn't even exist. I mean, it did, but it
for
was in its
better or for
infancy.
worse.
And
Yeah.
you know, you believed in what physicians were telling you. If a medication was approved by the FDA for some indication, you felt it was relatively safe. And you were
Yeah.
also aware that all medications have side effects and they usually don't occur. They're rare. So that's what I went in. I'm like, all right, if it happens, whatever side effect happens, it happens. I mean,
Yeah.
kids at that time, and they're doing it more now than ever, that's what kind of like when steroids started, I would say, like in the 80s, younger guys were taking steroids. And I mean, it was just kind of a different mentality. I mean, I know now everyone's on gear. For some reason, they're not afraid to take gear and dick pills, but they're afraid to take
Yeah.
finasteride.
That's true. That's facts.
Yeah.
And I guess you're also probably on minoxidil in that case if you're having it compounded. And interestingly with tretinoin as well, because that's something a lot of people that still to this day don't know about
Yeah.
when it comes to actually getting minoxidil to convert into its active form. And you were on minoxidil and tretinoin before Rogaine was even on the market. So
Right.
that's
Those were early days when there were some real doctors who were doing some real research, and they understood not only would it help with the enzyme conversion, but it would also help with absorption of the drug.
yeah,
So I had a good short-term response from it. It was just a
yeah,
Band-Aid, but I would say I salvaged about 2 years where the
yeah.
progression really slowed down, and that gave me enough time. So even though I had to wait from the age of 21 to about 28 to get on finasteride, I would have been a lot worse off.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, I would have
exactly.
been I would have been a Norwood 6 never coming back by the time I was 30.
You think?
I do.
Wow.
I do. I mean,
Yeah, and I
I
guess
started at 21. It was pretty aggressive. I mean, to be fair, it wasn't super aggressive. There's a lot more aggressive hair loss that guys
yeah,
suffer from. But when you start that young,
yeah.
and you're going through these massive telogen effluviums, you're not going to last too long.
It's not looking good.
No, it's a bad sign, brother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was the exact same. I was thinking like if I don't do something like pretty snappy, I don't think I got much longer left.
Now
But
you either got to
I guess
shave your head, and back in my day, you couldn't. If you shaved your head, you were a skinhead. That was it. You were in a
yeah.
different
Wow,
category of
yeah.
human beings.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy to actually think that just by shaving your head it would put you in that subcategory of people back
Yeah,
then.
yeah.
I never even thought of that. Never thought of
And my
it.
parents would have disowned me. It would have been I wouldn't have been able to go to social events. I mean, it was insane. I mean, there were like two guys. There was Telly Savalas from Kojak. You may not even know who he is, and Yul
I actually
Brynner,
don't know.
who was another
Yeah,
actor. And these were the two guys who shaved their heads who looked good, but
yeah.
they were looked at as the anomalies, and everyone else was a skinhead.
Wow. And I guess that is the thing when it comes to any sort of pioneering treatment in the medicine industry. It just takes a few people to actually give it a go and take the risk initially and see
Well,
whether it does actually work.
what's interesting is I took that risk, and I decided to kind of dedicate most of my time to researching and writing my first book. Had no idea if anyone would buy it. This was a time when you couldn't. I mean, if you self-published, it was no respectable book or author was self-published at that time. Now it's probably
Yeah.
better to self-publish. So to find an agent and to get published, I was turned down by 14 agents and 33 publishers before my book was sold. The
Yeah.
only reason it sold was because in December of 1997, Propecia was approved by the FDA. I
Mm,
written the book and tried to sell it before the drug was approved.
right.
So we were all of a sudden able to put a name on the cover of the drug, talk about the new approval. So Simon and Schuster, Warner Books, Little Brown Books, all like the major publishers came back, and we were like in a bidding war. So as a young first-time author, it's like they're offering me money now. Before they were turning it
Yeah.
down because they saw the market.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
it was all timing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in terms of timing in the world for A, just you being able to keep your hair in the first place, and B, a business standpoint, everything the stars aligned for you, really.
They did. I always think that if I had what you guys have today, these platforms
Yeah.
like social media, man, things would. I mean, I'm not saying it's easy. It's hard to become an influencer and to become well known, but
More
there's
competition, I
no
guess.
real barrier to entry.
No, not at all.
You know, so
Just need a phone.
you're dealing with. I had to go to like these big buildings on like Fifth Avenue. I'm walking to Simon Schuster at the time. It was a number one publishing house in the world, and they're like, "We're going to
Yeah.
put you on our imprint pocket books, which is like one of the best nonfiction imprints." I'm a kid, I'm like, I didn't even know what was going on, and it was really exciting. Um, but right away, I recognized once the online world began, and I started to talk about my book online. I got to tell you, man, it's like the men's hair loss community. It's such an ugly place. People are just such. I mean,
Still
there.
is today in parts.
I think it's as bad today, but it's scaled. So I mean, it's a
Mm.
super ugly place. There are some grateful people, some people who understand what you're doing. You're a little
Yeah.
different than I am because I'm older. I'm kind of coming back out of retirement. So people are like, where the hell did this guy come from? And they don't understand what the American Hair Loss Association is. And, they're looking at an old book that was published 30 years ago. I'm not telling them to buy the book. That's like the history of things.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I may have to write another book, I guess. But, it's
You
just,
should.
it's a pretty ugly situation. I think it's because people are angry. They want a solution. And the truth is, and that's why I like, what you're doing is you're telling these guys the truth. Listen, these are your options. I'm not telling you to get on this medication that's going to, make your penis fall off. I mean, it works for me. This is all we have to really, if you really want to save your hair, there's no other choices.
There isn't.
Topical finasterides and, these topical 5-alpha reductase inhibitors were only compounded because of, people who are fearful of taking oral medication.
Yeah.
There's no long-term clinical studies. We have no idea how long these compounded products are going to work. You have no idea what's exactly being compounded in these products, how, you know, um, you know, where the main ingredients, including the drugs, are being sourced.
Yeah.
It's a mess out there, man. And I know I just went off on a tangent, but when I think about it, it's like it just never changes. Like I just wish these younger people would just understand. Look, here are your options. If you are uncomfortable with these options, you have to shave your head or just kind of like clip it down and just move on.
Yeah. It's facts. It's facts. And in some regards, I do understand the mistrust and anger because a lot of it is just created by con men at the end of the day. Like
Yeah.
that's what creates all the mistrust because you never know who to believe because there's so much bullshit. There genuinely is just so much crap that people create out of nowhere.
Tom, I can tell you that and people think this is hyperbole, but it's 99% bullshit. Even the
Yeah.
health influencers, when you see these really well-known health influencers with millions of followers who have incredible YouTube channels who are making tens of millions of dollars a year, once they enter into the hair loss space, because they need content, that's what they
Mm.
tell their producers provide them with, and they have researchers provide them with this information, these studies, which don't even get me into these studies because it's so easy to get published in this space.
Just get a
And
rat.
say that again?
Just get a little rat.
Yeah, I mean,
Call it a
but
study.
but the way journals work today is they're looking for content just like any other, let's say, a media outlet. It's all about clicks, it's
Mm.
all about content, it's all about making money off their journals, remaining relevant. So they need this type of content. So they'll kind of like turn the other turn away from looking at the reality of the studies, and they'll take like stuff that are small little
Mm.
clinical studies that are done in offices and stuff like that. There's just so much nonsense. I lost my train of thought, but I guess essentially what I'm trying to say is it's all nonsense. Not much has changed.
Yeah.
But the problem is today's young consumer, they are kind of gravitating towards the nonsense. They don't want to hear the truth. When you tell them the
Mm.
truth, they get angry. They're like, okay, that's fine, but what's the solution? I just told you
Mm.
what the solution is. You have 3 or 4 options that work. Hair transplant surgery is a last resort. The vast majority of surgery that's being performed today is not state of the art. You guys are being disfigured, and if you're not disfigured right away, it's going to be a slow disfigurement as you continue to lose your
Mm.
hair. You're
Yeah.
going to wake up in 5 years and be like, "What the f did I do to myself?" And they don't want to hear that.
You've got a hairline but nothing behind it.
You got a hairline, nothing behind it, or and the thing is, there's this new normal of hair transplant surgery where an artificial look to them
Yeah.
is what a hair transplant they believe is supposed to look. It's almost like these women who have their lips done, and other
Mm.
women are aspiring to look like this. So there's this new normal and this unnaturalness created. And I'll give you an example. Like sometimes when I go online, if I'm criticizing or just being honest about a treatment, for instance, all these young kids, 17 to say 21, they're like, "Well, you're bald. Look at your hairline." And I'm like, if these kids think that this is bald, like at almost 60, I mean, they're in a world of hurt in a few years because they are going to use these, bogus products and services. They're going to derma roll themselves to death. They're going to destroy their scalps, and then they're going to be left with nothing. They may not even be able to get a hair transplant.
Yeah.
So they don't understand what reality is. They're looking at these low, tight. What are those hairstyles called?
A lineup.
Lineups. I mean,
Yeah.
you're getting a lineup hair transplant. You went to the wrong place, and B, you're by the time you are 35, you're done, brother. You're sitting there with hair like like you look
Above
like a
your
cartoon character. You know?
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I always say like and this is not to discredit doctors at all, but it's insane what 2 letters before your name and a lab coat, the amount of trust that can give when in reality a lot of these people are chatting absolute nonsense. They
I
really are.
I am in a position in my life where I can discredit a lot of doctors. It's great that these young guys, they worked hard as young people. They were
Mm.
good students. A lot of these people don't have a really incredible emotional intelligence. They get into a
Mm.
field or they get into medicine. They realize this is more difficult than I thought. I want to find something that pays cash. Then they're like, well, I could become a cosmetic surgeon. They jump into hair transplant surgery because they're told it's so easy and there's so much money to be made. There's really no training. These doctors don't learn how to perform the surgery in medical school. It doesn't matter if you're a
Mm.
board certified dermatologist. It's meaningless. Yeah, you're supposed to know about the skin and hair and the scalp, but the truth is most of these people don't know much about it, let alone they know nothing about surgery. So it's a very small handful of physicians in this field that perform surgery to state of the art standards. And listen, brother, you may or may not know the history, but I founded the International Alliance of Hair Restoration Surgeons 24 years ago now. Yeah, 24 years ago. I still can't find more than, I think at the most we had was like 70 doctors listed, and
Mm.
some died, or retired. But I can't. We get thousands of applications over the years. I think we're close to 4,000 now with all the Turks and the Indians who are applying. I can't take their dues because they suck at what they do. So I would love to grow that organization, but I think that just illustrates how terrible this industry is and how few doctors are actually performing hair transplant surgery to state of the art
Yeah.
standards. They understand about patient selection. They're turning these young patients away. They would never perform these large volume cases of FUE only on these patients. I mean, no ethical doctor, it doesn't matter how great a mechanic they are, would perform these
Mm.
types of surgeries on anyone under the age of 40.
Mm.
And it's happening every
And,
day.
and the thing is, as well, it's not even just hair transplant surgeries. It's also, people will be like, oh, these hair specialists will say, well, you don't need medication. Finasteride is bad, minoxidil is bad, and you need to go into my clinic and use my laser device instead.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's these guys now. There's these companies that are selling these, stem cell treatments with PRP, and not all PRP is created equal. A very small percentage of people will benefit from PRP. It has to be the really specific PRP based on your own platelet counts.
Mm.
And everyone's platelet counts are slightly different every day. And so, the preparation of PRP is vital for it to work. Most of it will not work. And most people are getting either platelet neutral plasma or platelet poor plasma injected into their scalps for it could be $1,500 a shot, depending on where you go, you know?
Mm.
Or these guys are now selling these stem cell products. And you have big companies now who are these online subscription companies who are selling topical exosome products to idiots who are just
Yeah,
lapping it up. And I say idiots, I'm sorry. Listen, I get it. I was one of those idiots. I bought everything. But
yeah,
none of this stuff is going to help you. And it just, there's no fighting it. When you try to tell them the truth, these people get upset.
yeah. You, you need to do your research ultimately, and a lot of people don't want to do that. They don't. I understand it because when you try and read a scientific study, if you don't have some sort of education in university degree or have been taught how to read a study, it can be quite confusing. But
It is. And that's a good point.
yeah,
It's very confusing. And also, people don't fully grasp how these studies were put into a
yeah,
journal and how they were performed. So, what disappoints me most are guys who are out there who are well known health influencers who leverage
mm,
these studies just to get clicks.
yeah,
Like studies of topical caffeine, studies on, rosemary oil compared to 2% minoxidil, all incredibly flawed studies that don't equate to the real world and never have. It's almost like
yeah.
that initial creatine study in 2009 and I'm personally, I don't take creatine because I'm like, I don't know. But in
I'm running an
reality,
experiment at the moment.
yeah, I saw that. But in
Yeah,
reality, there's only one study that showed, and it was a small study, I think it was 22 rugby players that showed in a
yeah,
very short period of time that creatine raised their DHT levels by about 40%, which is significant, but they didn't see any hair loss during that short period of time. And they
yeah,
didn't do any follow up. And maybe it's because they were training harder. Maybe it had nothing to do with the creatine. Um, and just because your DHT goes up doesn't mean that you're more susceptible, especially if you're taking medication. I mean, who knows? But to this day, and I need to take something at this point in my life, I'm holding off on the creatine because I've been trying to save every hair that I could. And I've been
yeah,
hearing, you hear anecdotal reports like when I was on the radio and now that coming out of retirement, where people do say they're shedding from creatine. And
yeah,
But as a professional, I would say, based on all the data and knowing how to read it, I would say there's really no evidence that there's any direct causal evidence, I should say,
no,
that creatine monohydrate will increase any type of shedding or any type of creatine, especially if you're
yeah.
taking it within like 3 to 5 milligram dose.
Yeah. I mean, so that's literally what I'm trying to do at the moment because I was having so many people ask me, will creatine increase my hair loss? So I thought, okay, I'll take it for around 8 to 10 weeks. I'll take my DHT. It is just serum DHT levels. I didn't get a scalp biopsy because I didn't have the facilities to be doing that. But
But you
I
don't
was
want to cut your
literally
scalp. You don't want to cut your scalp anyway.
no,
Yeah,
not
yeah,
really.
yeah.
So I thought best thing that I can do is get my DHT tested with a good clinic, a reputable clinic, take it for 8 weeks, and then monitor the shedding, which hasn't been too crazy. Still have shed a little bit, but can't say that isn't just natural hair, just the hair cycle doing its thing. And then at the end of 8 to 10 weeks, I'm going to go and test it again and see if the levels have increased at all.
Now,
And
have you noticed an increase in shedding after, like a few weeks after taking it, or was it just coinciding with taking the drug? I mean, the supplement.
I'd say it was more just coinciding with it, to be fair. At the moment, it's not, I have shed a little bit more than I would potentially
I mean,
normally,
see, that
but
fucks me up. Now I don't want to do it.
yeah.
You know?
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And I thought I've got to do it because, I think ultimately if my DHT levels come back significantly higher, then I probably will stop taking it. But if they're the same level, then I'll carry on
I mean,
taking
because
it
that stuff
because,
really does work. It can increase
yeah,
your your muscle volume by it could be 2 to 5% depending on how much you're able to absorb. And I have to tell you,
yeah,
just that little bit will tighten up the old skin arms that I'm starting to get. And I think about
yeah,
it, I would love to do that because
yeah,
I'm still trying. Like I'm still trying to play basketball. I can't do it like I used to. It just
yeah.
it is the way that it is. But I'm still working out on a regular basis. I don't
Love that.
really weight train as much as I do body
Mm.
weight, like pull-ups, push-ups, lunges, stuff to keep myself from falling apart and keep my
Yeah.
muscle. And I think that's another question
Wow.
that the young guys your age have is they're concerned about how it's going to affect finasteride is going to affect them in the gym. And I can tell you
It's
that
ridiculous.
I am not like jacked by any means,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty muscular. I've maintained a lot of muscle. I have not gotten, I mean, there's times if you look at some old videos, I was drinking, I was getting bloated, but I was big. And
Yeah.
I would say that most people would be surprised at how much muscle someone who's been on finasteride for 30 years kept. For some reason they think it's
Yeah.
going to diminish your muscle tone, but it really doesn't, at least in my experience.
Yeah. Well, there's been so many studies as well that literally show the distinct difference that testosterone to DHT has on lean tissue, being able to help build lean tissue, and DHT literally sucks at building muscle, and it's been shown in so many studies. It just pales in comparison to testosterone. And obviously, when you're taking a 5-alpha reductase inhibitor, you're obviously converting less testosterone into DHT. So obviously, you have a little bit more left over
If,
as
if you're
just
lucky, if it's
testosterone.
not being aromatized, like some guys who
Yes.
end up having more estrogen, but
Yeah.
that's pretty rare. And there's one thing you'll notice about me. The one thing I
Mm.
don't do, and I've always tried not to do, is put up studies and talk about studies, because that could always get you in trouble as well. Because all of a sudden there's guys like, oh, it's just bro science. But what I like about you when you do it is
Mm.
some of these studies have been around for so long that the fact that you're coming out and talking about this stuff now at your point in life, to me makes a lot of sense. For
Mm.
me, when certain studies initially came out, right away you're a shill for Merck or whatever. So
Yeah.
I never wanted to do that. I only wanted to talk about my experiences, and that's why I did the live calls to let people then share their experiences about the drug as well. If you notice, when people call the program, and the old shows are not around, but we used to get like a crazy amount of phone calls when we were on radio. You don't hear all the negative effects. It's not people calling to complain about post-finasteride syndrome, or they're calling to say, I wish I would have taken the drug earlier. They're calling to talk about their positive experiences, or if they are suffering with adverse side effects, they're learning how to titrate to avoid the side effects or,
Yes.
or to diminish the side effects.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I did when I was starting because as pretty much I think every person that Googles finasteride is these days who's losing their hair and is considering treatment, I was scared. Obviously, I was terrified of the side effects. I was like, well, I don't really want any of these bad things to happen. I don't want my dick to stop working. I
Yeah,
don't want I don't want to be depressed, all these things. Obviously, fortunately I did all the research. But because of that, I thought, okay, maybe it makes more sense if I titrate the dose from day one and actually start at zero point 0.5 milligrams 3 times a week and then just pretty much add in a pill every couple of weeks until I reach the point where I was at 1 milligram every day.
I
What's your
love
thoughts
that.
on that?
I think it's
Yeah,
great. I talked about titrating my entire career. Every
yeah,
physician was like, you have to take 1 milligram a day. It has such a short life. It's been proven that
yeah,
anything less is not going to be as effective when that's not the truth. Even during the initial clinical trials, it showed that there was some benefit from a lower dosage. But
yeah.
my
Even
titration was,
0.01, wasn't it?
yeah, my titration was
Teeny bit.
completely opposite. because when I
Yeah.
was starting, I started on 5 milligrams a day.
Yeah.
That's all. And no one knew about cutting up the pills. And it was just like, take this medication, your hair stopped falling out. I had no adverse side effects at 5 milligrams a day. And then I went through was eventually called the dread shed after about 8 months on the drug.
Mm.
And no one, I mean, the internet was barely in existence. No one was talking about it. I thought the drug stopped working. So what did I do? The genius that I am, I upped my dosage to 7.5 milligrams. You know, I was in sheer terror, you know, and I also had no adverse side effects that I was aware of. And I was also drinking as a young person. I was occasionally smoking cigarettes when I was drinking. I mean, not that much, but you know, what kids do.
Yeah.
I was just doing stupid things, but I don't know if it was my age or what, but I had no problems. Now, we're seeing problems in younger people for whatever reason, I think, and we can talk about that. But anyway, so my titration was different. Once Merck came out and I got some embargoed information that couldn't be shared through the media publicly, but they would send you stuff, you know, because I was doing research for a book. I was like, okay, they're doing 1 milligram. Let me see if I could lower my dosage. My shedding stopped, and let me slowly lower my dosage. So I got to the point where I was taking 1 5 milligram dose of Proscar once a week, and I was
Really?
maintaining the benefits. And I did that for well over 20 years. I've only
Wow.
recently, maybe about 2 years ago, upped my dosage to taking about two 5 milligram dosages every, you know, like I take one pill about every fifth day.
Oh, I never knew that.
Yeah. So essentially, I don't keep my DHT levels level. They kind of go up and
Mm.
down. And there is some theory that I've tricked my body. And that's why I've kind of had this long lasting effect that some people don't get. So I don't know.
Yeah. Fair. That's really interesting because one of the things that I often think is when people get these sudden influx of side effects when they just straight away go to 1 milligram daily every single day, and then you do tend to see a lot of these guys with side effects go away after a few weeks.
Yeah.
That's why I think often going straight in at 1 milligram straight away might not be the best idea.
Well, we do know, at least clinically, and I say clinically, in the real world, I'm in a
Mm.
position where I speak to probably well over 1,000 physicians who prescribe this drug to
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of men over the last almost 30 years.
Mm.
And I used to go, when I was really interested in things before I retired, I used to go to these meetings. So they would have annual meetings. They're like more like trade shows, but they're supposed to be scientific meetings. And people would talk about their patients. And there was no talk of long-term adverse side effects. No one was coming back. And these are the guys who were really prescribing the drug, coming back to
Yeah.
them saying, I can't get it up. I stopped taking the drug, and it's continuing. It didn't exist.
Yeah.
It started in 2005. There was an RX website, essentially a prescription commenting website or review website, and you saw these prescription, great reviews for Proscar and then, and for Propecia for a while. And some people complained about side effects, but nothing serious.
Mm.
Two guys went on there and started to bombard this particular site with this post-finasteride syndrome, which it wasn't coined at the time.
Mm.
And within a very short period of time, one of these post-finasteride syndrome support group sites went up.
Yeah.
And that's when everything kind of took off. So they created a community where others can then go in and think about, wait a second, is this happening to me? And you may or may not know the story about Erwig and his very flawed study. It wasn't a study at all. It was more of a survey. And everyone who's part of this survey were actually part of this particular message group or this complaint forum. So
Mm.
everyone already thought they were permanently damaged. So these are the people that were in his study that was published in what I would consider to be initially a questionable place. But then the news picked it up, and then the ambulance chasers picked it up, and the rest is history. And
Yeah.
now it just became poison for years.
Yeah, and it still is in the media. Like they'll pick up something like that has no genuine scientific proof and run with it. And it's happened recently in quite a few different countries, including my own. And they've talked about it in the biggest media outlets that we've got. And it just, I'm not going to air this person out, but I remember there's a guy that I know, and he was considering going on finasteride, but he saw this news report, and he's like, you can hear his parents in the background, like, God, look what happens to you if you take this.
Yeah.
And it just shows you how, because the thing is, if a massive news outlet, a media outlet says, even comments on something, everyone just takes it at face value
Well,
because
it's amazing, especially given the time frame and where the time we're living in today with the media. I mean, we know that
yeah,
the media talked about other medications in a favorable light, which didn't work out too well. So
yeah,
the reality is, and this is also what's interesting. So not too long ago, the mainstream media picked up oral minoxidil like it was the next thing, greatest thing since sliced bread.
yeah,
And one of the reasons that happened was, we did something called the Global Hair Loss Summit during the pandemic, and Sergio
mm,
Bagno presented his study in his clinic of men he was putting on low dose oral finasteride. Now, this is something that doctors have been doing forever since I've been in the field, but it wasn't really talked about. So
do you
the
mean oral minoxidil?
oral minoxidil.
Yeah,
So the study came out, and then a couple of dermatologists, we had a really big turnout. It was the biggest online meeting in the field. So we had the American Academy of Dermatology who were involved. We had, cosmetic surgery organizations. We had the Aesthetic Society. So it wasn't just hair people. So they
mm,
saw this thing. They were home. They had nothing to do. They wanted to be part of a summit, of a meeting, and they all watched this. And all of a sudden, dermatologists started to prescribe it, and someone from the New York Times decides to write an article about it. And
mm,
it just took off like wildfire. Now, what they weren't discussing is there are some pretty significant adverse side effects
yeah,
that could be considered, if you were looking at the physician's desk reference, more severe than the side effects that we see with finasteride.
yeah,
But the media didn't pick
definitely.
up on that. The media chose to paint it in a positive light. It's a lot sexier to essentially go out there and say, you have a choice. You could either keep your hair or and lose your sex life, or go bald and maintain a sex life. And that's kind of the way
Yeah,
they framed it, really from the very beginning of the drug. But now they have a little bit more ammunition because of these consumer advocacy groups, which at times this is going to piss people off. I question, you know, um, part of the reasons that they're moving in the direction that they're moving, and the way in which they're moving. Like you were talking about, or we were talking about, or you were talking about on your own. I shared it about the
mm,
potential ban in Europe.
mm,
I mean, these poor kids are going nuts. Now, that's very
yeah,
unlikely, but if it wasn't for a real propaganda push, this wouldn't even be looked at like this.
no,
You know, like physicians are not reporting this to these, governing bodies and these systems, and a lot of the reporting is being pushed by these organizations. Look, if you're having problems, go here and report this. You feel depressed? Oh, it's finasteride. Go here and report
yeah,
this. So there's just a lot of people who are pushing young, vulnerable men in this direction who are already depressed, who are already
yeah,
messed up. Look,
yeah.
the worst part of my life was the initial throes of my hair loss.
Oh yeah, like literally is one of the most depressing things as a guy. Like, and
Horrendous.
the fact, in a way, the likes of finasteride, dutasteride do act as an antidepressant for the vast majority of guys going bald because particularly, and I know it's every guy, guys think, oh, I won't care about my hair loss when I'm 30, 40, 50. You probably will, but particularly when you're in your 20s and your looks are probably very important to you, when that's suddenly just taken away from you and you see it, day by day, week by week, starting to thin, your hairline's going back. it's incredibly depressing. Really is.
It for a lot of people, it makes their lives much more difficult in so many ways. And
It does.
there's unseen ways. You know, I kind of coined it as a disease of the spirit. I used to call it a cancer of the spirit, but when I was getting a lot of press back in the 90s, the press would just really, and people hated
Yeah.
me combining cancer and this, but it's a cancer of the spirit. It
Mm.
destroys people's lives. And for anyone who just says, just man up and deal with
Mm.
it, that's great. You know, like I love, another trusted content creator is Harry from Bald Cafe because I love his message. But in all
Mm.
fairness, Harry happens to look super great. He's one of the guys who looks incredible with a shaved head. He has great facial hair, great facial structure. He looks incredible. And I love what he's providing people with support and
Mm.
guidance to go in this direction. So there's a lot of other guys who look as good as he does, but not everyone will. So,
Yeah.
I think, at least through the American Hair Loss Association, we want people to see every option and to see different communities because we're all in this together. But
Yeah.
yeah,
There's a
brother,
real
I mean,
dichotomy though between. It seems like there is a real dichotomy between shaving it and not shaving it though,
well,
particularly on like Reddit and stuff.
it becomes tribal like anything else, like politics. I mean, we're born. This is the way that our minds have been wired through
Yeah.
evolution. We're born to be part of tribes,
Yeah.
and so there's a lot of people who can't evolve past that, and they can't see someone else's perspective,
Yeah.
and they like being part of a group. And that's fine. I like being part of a group too. But, I had to choose a position where I wasn't equipped to deal with my hair loss at a young age. I wasn't equipped to shave my head. I wanted to do whatever I can. So I provide people with information who are like me,
Mm.
who don't want to go bald if they could help it. But I
Yeah.
want
They want the
to,
choice. They want the choice.
right. And I want to help them navigate through this cesspool of an industry safely. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all I want to do. But I think what Harry does is incredible. He's empowered a lot of people. So I want people to see that too, because honestly, I tell people all the time, and someone got mad at me on Instagram about this. He was like, "Oh, you just tell people to shave their head and move on," because I had commented or I had shared something of Harry's. And I'm like, brother, you got to watch my show, or you got to learn more about me because I'm the
Yeah.
one guy who wasn't equipped. I'm that guy. I'm like you, who doesn't
Yeah.
want to shave their head.
Yeah.
And you said
People
something.
don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
I say people don't. It's one of the shortcomings of short form content that people will not always understand entirely what you mean because you've got to fit everything that you're trying to say into such a small video. And a lot of people will look at my videos and think, "Oh, I hate the idea. Anybody that shaves their head is wrong." Like that is not what the message that I'm trying to get across
No,
at all.
no. I mean,
Shaving your head is a form of treatment.
there are some people who are thoughtful in their comments and they're very grateful for what I do, and I know they're very grateful
Yeah,
for what you do. I think there's a lot of young
yeah,
guys who don't fully understand what I do yet because to them I'm new.
yeah,
I have guys who are like, "Oh yeah, great, you're the president of this and this and this. What does that mean? Give me a solution." Well, what that means is that I have a lot of experience that I've been in this field and really helped to shape at least a good part of the field for the last 30 years. I know all the scams. I know exactly what's going to happen with surgery, who makes a good candidate, who doesn't. I'm just trying to
mm,
prepare you guys for this. And that's a difficult thing for people it's not palatable to the younger generation, especially today, because they want an instant fix because everyone else is saying, here are the top 3 things you can do to stop your hair loss or whatever. And that's just, I do that stuff to some degree to get eyeballs. But in
yeah.
the end, I'm like,
You've
look,
got to.
and I'm like, read this article. And I provide them with free content from the American Hair Loss Association. And people are like, oh, you just want me to go to your paywall? I'm like,
Yeah,
what do you read the caption, watch the entire video. So it's
yeah,
frustrating. And again, I'm new to this. So I'm just trying to like navigate it myself. Like I know the online world is ugly, but Jesus, your generation, I've never
yeah.
seen anything like it. I don't know how you deal with it.
As I've said to you before, I think I will say the vast majority of people that watch my content these days and comment and everything like that are just wonderful. Like I'm very grateful for the people that do watch my stuff because, as I say, the vast majority are really nice. But you do, particularly when I was first starting, and the videos might not have been reaching the right people initially. People can be awful. They can be. I think a lot of people when they're commenting online, they don't actually like perceive that there's someone else is somewhere else in the world on the screen that they're looking at, and they just write a nasty comment and don't actually properly think about what they're doing. Because I think these days as well, people don't think there's any consequences to it,
Well, I think
and there
that's also
isn't in reality.
kind. I think that's kind of you, and you're kinder than I am when
Yeah,
it comes to that. But I would say there's a lot of bad people in the world, and there are people who are just frustrated. You
yeah,
know, I do. I always find it interesting when someone will comment about like that I have a receded hairline,
mm,
and I said this before. I'm trying to think. What do they think their reality is? They're already looking at balding content, and they're 18. Where do they think they're going to be?
yeah,
If they're that young balding, they may not even have a chance with medication.
yeah,
They may be totally screwed. So I feel bad for them. There's such a sense of, and also, I don't want to get heavily into transplants, but everyone thinks a hair transplant now is a quick fix. That this is it. Just go to Turkey for a hair transplant, and that is just not the way that it works. You
no,
have to be a very specific candidate for a successful hair transplant. It will take multiple surgeries. Once you're cut, you are cut. You're in it for life. And in the end, you never have enough supply to meet the demand. So if every graft isn't utilized perfectly, every aspect and step of that procedure, these are mini organ transplants. It's like an
yeah,
orchestra of fine tuning with using different people on your scalp. I mean, you're screwed, people. And these guys, I saw this. There was this one influencer who I'm not going to mention who he is, but he got a hair transplant. He's a fitness guy, very nice guy. It's horrendous. It's absolutely horrendous. He doesn't even know what he's in for. And he's
yeah,
young. He's like 32 years old. I mean, he will never have a normal life. But right now
mm,
he's happy because he has hair on his head.
yeah, yeah. As I said, I think I said to you before, it is kind of a double-edged sword when you are balding as a young person because a it sucks that you're going bald, always does, particularly as a young person, but you do catch it early and it's the kick up the arse to go and start treatment or look into what are the solutions that you can actually have in this day and age because otherwise you might be just losing your hair insidiously for the best part of a couple of decades and have lost the vast majority of hair that you could have saved earlier on if you'd have noticed. So
Well, if they're wasting their time with derma stamping and rosemary oil, even if they see some initial peach fuzz growing in, trust me,
yeah,
they're wasting precious time, man.
mm,
They're going to end up, and they're going to end up in someone's chair who will transplant them, and then they're
yeah,
going to be in a lifetime of hurt because they're going to go to the
yeah,
wrong people. There was a time when hair transplants were expensive, and part of that was important because it created a barrier to entry to
yeah,
younger people who are more vulnerable to jumping into surgery. Now there's no
yeah,
barrier to entry. You can fly to Turkey, $2,000, you get 4,000 grafts, and they just bag them and tag them. Next, next, next. I saw a
yeah.
guy recently contact me, and this is not uncommon. A third of his scalp was necrotic. A third of his scalp died.
Damn,
He paid €2,000 for his hair transplant.
that's awful. I was like, it's really sad to be fair.
Yeah.
So when it was when you were first sort of coming into the industry and looking on, when the online space, the internet was in its infancy, and you were sort of looking on balding forums, and you were the guy that has just taken this new treatment, finasteride, one of the only people one of the first people to ever take it. How did people react to you back then?
Well, initially there were no forums. They were like alt dot groups, like
Yeah,
message boards type of thing. Initially, it was not positive. because I was also talking about my book, not selling it. It wasn't even out yet. Just saying, look, I was published. This was my experience. I was able to stop my hair loss. Right away, people thought I was spamming them, and there was negativity, and then some people are saying, yeah, we know about finasteride, but, whatever. I mean, it wasn't as the long-term adverse side effects were not talked about, but people were concerned about libido issues, whatever it is. And I was just like, look, I'm just telling you my experience. I'm not selling anything, and this is a drug that's going to really benefit a lot of people. So initially, it was hostile from the beginning. And then eventually, people came around a little bit. I spent a little time on the forums. I knew a guy, his name was Pharaoh Man. He owned a forum called Hairloss Help. It was actually one of the first forums, besides his other forum, Hair Site, which somehow is still around. And these
Yeah.
are all nasty, nasty places. But Hairloss Help became the most popular forum at the time. So,
Yeah, I've heard about that one.
yeah, so I would be commenting back and forth, and he wanted me involved, and it was just terrible. I mean, some of it was positive, and some of it wasn't. But in general, and then other really ugly forums spawned off from that. I was asked to start a forum called Bald Truth Talk about a decade after these other forums started, because it was by a bunch of physicians, because there was so much, like, I'll use the word extortion. People were extorting these doctors. There were patients that either owners of these forums, or I mean, the ugliness that goes on behind the scenes is something that you could never imagine, Tom. So I started this forum, became really popular, and then was like, this is the ugliest place in the world too. I basically just dropped it. I let it die. I mean, some reason it still gets traffic, and there's nothing really being posted on there. Maybe some spam, and maybe I could, bring it back to life at some point or sell it. But to answer your question, it was always very ugly. It's very difficult to have a position that, like, either you have or I have, where people are going to see you always in a positive light, especially once you
Yeah.
get out of your own social media space. Once you cross over
Yeah.
into another space, they're going to find something to try to criticize you about. They're going to try to make your involvement into a dark situation, like you're trying to either just sell something or make money from this.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with earning a living, especially if you're helping people.
Exactly. And that's what I always say, people, when we've talked about this before, people expect you to just provide information for free and be essentially a martyr and just provide without ever getting anything back. When in reality, that this day and age, we're very lucky to be in a position where we've got the opportunity to work with brands and good brands as well. Like, if you're talking about something that you use, a product, and it's a good product or a treatment and it works for you and it's been proven, and these brands want to work with you, there's a win-win-win situation where the brand will often offer a lot of creators a code or some sort of fee,
Yeah.
and then that code gives your viewers a discount on a product that they were already going to buy, and they get a discount on it. You help your favorite creator who is helping you with providing you all the information, the knowledge to understand these topics, helps them out so they can keep doing it, and the brand wins and they can keep making the product. So it's a win-win-win. But people don't see that. They just think, okay, there's got to be some sort of ulterior motive to it, and there's some malice behind it. When in reality, like, it's not. It's a good situation, but
Well,
people don't trust. And
I would say that, for the most part, you're 100% right. But there are some people who have unfortunately spoiled it for the good guys like you.
yes,
And, I'm in a different position. And, as I decide, like, I retired young, and I decided to come back because I'm still relatively young for it to be retired. And I'm like,
mm,
I have a lot of energy. I have a tremendous amount of knowledge. I'm in a position where I'm very involved with the field, so I know exactly what's going on, and I can tell these
yeah,
kids the truth. And I'm really the only person in the field who could fully afford to tell people 100% of the truth, and
yeah,
that's rare. So, like, you see some guys, and there's some good guys in the field, and even guys that I work with, but you know, um, but I could say that I'm probably the only person who is not afraid politically to say something that may be kind of like off-putting to the medical professionals in the field, to the societies in the field. I'm the founder of the American Hair Loss Association. I founded the IHRS. The doctors who are involved with what we do understand that I'm just going to be out there telling the truth. As I continue to grow this, whatever underwriters I decide to work with, direct underwriters, they're not going to be in the hair industry for me. So I've already gotten some offers from like men's products and stuff like that people use. So that's fine.
Yeah.
We have a trusted brand program, which I talk about on the show all the time. That is, being able to carry our IP from the American Hair Loss Association. So I'm able to do things in a different way without having to have, what are they called? Custom codes, discount codes,
Yeah.
promo
Or
codes.
affiliate links.
Yeah, affiliate links
Things
and
like that.
stuff like
Yeah.
that. I don't see anything wrong with that if you're selling something really good. But again, I think for the most part, the reason you may get some crap is because the bad actors have spoiled it for so many good people out there. So
Absolutely.
that's why I wanted to create the trusted content creator program. So at the very least, these guys have a fighting chance in knowing, all right, this guy his content is trusted. Like I can't guarantee all the products that you're going to get involved with, Tom, that we're going to be able
Yeah.
to endorse. But I can say at this point, I know that you're working with a company that is providing legit finasteride and minoxidil products, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm using.
Anything that I, yeah, anything that I would promote to anyone else, I want to use it myself.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be telling people to use things that I wouldn't take myself or take, even if it is, however far down the line, a new novel treatment does come out and it's got good studies behind it. Like, I'd want to use it myself before I even recommended it to anyone else.
100%. And listen, I've told these people who want to work with me or who want to become trusted brands, I said, I'm not changing my routine. So Spencer
Yeah.
Kobren is not going to be bopping around the internet with a laser cap. Spencer Kobren is not going to be taking your generic product because I've been taking brand name for so long. I'm
Yeah.
not messing with it. But if you're able to provide me with evidence and
Yeah.
where you're sourcing this product from, if there's any changes, say it's a prescription product, if there's going to be any changes to the medication or where it's being sourced from, that we can provide that to the consumer ahead of time,
Yeah.
then you can work with me. So far, there's only one company that's come to the table who wants to work with us, who's willing to provide all the information. So far, they have, but it has to be an ongoing basis until we actually provide them with our seal. So that's going to
Yeah.
happen, which is great. But all I can tell your listeners and your viewers is, look, in my world, I have nothing to sell. I think what Tom is doing is great. It's very important. I mean, he caught my attention right away. And I think
Thank you.
that, like you said, you're helping a lot. I mean, people appreciate what you're doing. You're helping a lot of people, showing them, listen, there is hope out there without having to buy nonsense. It's such a dangerous place that there has to be at least some sort of a way for people to understand which influencers are really providing honest information. And that's
Yeah.
been very difficult so far. So hopefully, together and with some other people, we can make that happen.
Definitely. And guys, by the way, just to say, I've had some bookie offers from companies genuinely, and I've had to turn them down. Like, I'm not
Oh,
gonna like name the companies, but like, just the randomest treatments that you like just wouldn't work at all. But
dude, I can't.
I have turned them down to stay authentic.
Yeah, I can tell you the amount of money that I've turned down, and I've talked about this, so it's always consistent throughout the years. You can find old tapes of me saying this. Old school
Mm.
laser combs and helmets. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that I could have
Yeah.
earned without doing anything. Just allowing them to be on my broadcast or be part of
Yeah.
what we do through the American Hair Loss Association. And I've turned that down. And it's not because I'm being altruistic. For me, it was like, okay, this is not my business model. My business model is I hustle truth. That's what I do.
Mm.
And I've been able to figure out a way to earn over all these years by being honest. That's tough in this industry. And I think
Yeah.
you're doing a really good job. so far.
Thank you.
You're still new in this. You're going to get a lot of offers, brother. And there's going to be some offers. You're going to sit down with your dad, and he's going to be like, "Take the money. Just take the money."
Yeah.
And you're going to have to make a decision at some point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
So
that being said, obviously there are the treatments that are just blatantly like, you know, a load of crap. But that being said, I am also excited for the future and what treatments are in the pipeline because I think within the next few decades we should have a better set of weapons in our arsenal
I'm excited
against
for
the balding
guys
curse.
your age because I think you're going to have a lot more than we had. And I
Yeah,
honestly think it may happen sooner rather than later. And this is the first time I've
I
ever
think
said
so too.
this. When I started, hair cloning was already being talked about. My very first
Mm,
show, we were talking about hair cloning in 1998 on WABC
yeah,
radio. And then I realized it's always 5 years away. Every researcher that presented me with their information, it just, essentially the way research works, in short, is say Columbia, for instance, or some other university, they
mm,
go out and get enough press as they can in order to continue to get funded
yeah,
so that they have all their labs paid and their salaries paid, but they don't necessarily ever get anything done. So
right,
they may find something that's linked to the possibility of finding something for hair loss in mice. That gets them more funding. And really, that's their job to keep their labs open, to keep the salaries
yeah,
flowing. It's not necessarily to find an effective treatment or effective cure. I think it's going to happen through private industry.
yeah.
And, so I think I'm more excited now than I ever have been. And hopefully,
Me
my,
too.
my goal is to stay alive to see that. And
Hopefully.
and maybe when I'm 70, I'll be able to comb my hair back. You know?
Yeah. Is there any treatments in particular that, you know, you're looking forward to and you actually hopeful of
Listen,
currently?
my thing is it'll be great to be able to create hair follicles that can then be implanted that are DHT
Yes.
resistant. Terrific. But the problem is no matter how great the hair transplant is, it'll never truly mimic nature. You can
Yeah.
maybe transplant 50% of of what nature gave you to give you an
Yeah.
illusion of a full head of hair. Anything more than that, you can cause a tremendous amount of damage, and the grass won't grow. You also have to
Mm.
go to a really skilled team and surgeon. So those precious grafts that are being created for you can be easily destroyed, easily damaged by poor handling, placed at the wrong angles, which is happening every day. So yeah,
Mm.
that would be great. But you're also going to see a lot of guys walking around who look like chia pets with their hair growing up perpendicular, at a perpendicular angle, like you
Yeah.
see all the time online now with these really terrible transplants. But that would still be great because at least I'd be able to go to the right doctor and get it done for myself and for my
Yeah.
family. And if you ever needed a Tom, I'd hook you up too. But
Cheers, Spencer.
but I do think that it's going to be a more effective gene therapy. Even later in life, they may be able to alter those genes
Yeah.
and reverse the miniaturization process. People think that your hair dies, but it takes a long time for that follicle not to pump out any hair anymore. It could take
Yeah.
decades for some people.
We see miracles when some guys literally take finasteride and they're so far down the line and suddenly they take it maybe looking pretty much at the point where they're close to bald and then suddenly they've got hair again.
There's this guy in Australia. I don't want to name him. He's a friend of the Bald Truth. He had a head
Yeah.
like Formica. It was just pale white. Like you didn't see any peach fuzz anywhere. He started on
Yeah.
oral minoxidil and finasteride in his 50s.
Yeah.
He grew back almost all of his hair. He has a little bit of crown loss and a little recession. It's
Wow.
unbelievable.
That's one of I've always wanted to just like see what would happen if I put my dad on treatment just to see.
If your dad is willing to do it, he already to me even shaved. He looks like he still has a decent amount of hair, like in his
Yeah.
frontal forelock, that can add a lot. And if he
Yeah.
grows his crown, he could end up looking like better than his wedding pictures.
Yeah. We'll have to see. Maybe we'll do a little series.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
I
Well,
think if your dad's interested,
oh, hang on, I
yeah,
flipped sideways on my thing.
go ahead.
Hang on. How do I do that?
take your time. For some reason, it's still recording. So hopefully, when I press end, it actually keeps it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully, yeah.
And
But yeah,
if it doesn't, at least
guys,
we had a good conversation, and at least we have,
yeah,
we're comfortable with each other.
exactly. But yeah, guys, if as and when these new treatments do come out, like I think any influencers, content creators that aren't, they're recommending these products and not trying them themselves. Those are the people that you shouldn't be trusting. Or companies just, so many companies these days are stealing people's videos. Like those companies steal my videos
Oh
and
yeah.
claim that I'm using their product.
Oh yeah.
And
I mean,
it's just,
I have doctors who have been stealing our IP, trying to carry the American Hair Loss Association seal or the IHRS seal for decades,
yeah,
and we have to send cease and desist, and we also sometimes it's like you're dealing with foreign countries. It's almost impossible to get this stuff taken down.
yeah,
So
it's awful.
but one last thing for your listeners, health influencers. If you're watching these really well-known doctors who like are on Rogan, whatever it is, and they're really well respected, they're great. They know what they're talking about with a lot of things, but for some reason when they enter the hair space, you got to look at them with a jaundiced eye because they're usually providing either partial truths, some misinformation, and some of it's even wives' tales, and it's so surprising to me when I
Yeah,
see this.
yeah,
You probably noticed it yourself, and you're just like, "How is this?" The one health influencer that I think gets it right is that guy Derek from More Dates, More
yeah,
Plates.
Derek. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know Derek.
yeah,
Derek's a good guy.
yeah. He seems
He
like a good guy.
Yeah, well, he'll actually go into the genuine studies, and he understands like the actual medical literature as well. Whereas I think a lot of guys just take a study at face
Dude,
value.
he was on Dr. Peter Attila show or Attila. I can't pronounce his name.
I tell you,
Attila,
yeah,
yeah. And I just saw his face. He was trying to control himself. He did a good job, but
yeah,
he was really trying to school this guy,
yeah,
and it was interesting to watch. Because Peter's incredibly articulate. He has a great background. He gets so much online publicity. He's just incredible. He's just a very smart guy. But for whatever
yeah,
reason, this information throws them off, especially if they're speaking to a couple of like younger urologists who may have been concerned about prescribing it to young people themselves, but they'll prescribe it to guys in their 50s, no problem.
yeah. Well, I think key take home messages, guys. Don't believe everything that you hear online. They'll say a study should be taken at face value when a lot of the time, you know, not every study is good. Like
That's
a lot of them will be done on mice and stuff like that. And I think,
That's 100% right. And honestly, studies are there's so many different variables when it comes to studies and how studies are published, and the average layperson doesn't fully understand it. And most people in this industry, even health influencers, leverage these incredibly flawed or even debunked studies to
yeah,
sell products or services. And I just want to say one last thing. I'm talking about these health influencers, biohackers, all these guys. They will say things that are against finasteride. And there's two
mm,
guys in particular. One guy that I spoke with here, actually in Santa Monica, in a grocery store. We bumped into each other. He's very famous. I recognized him, but he recognized me. So we started to talk about things. He asked me what I thought about Huberman's podcast on hair loss, and I gave him my insights. And he asked me about post-finasteride syndrome. I gave him my insights. And then things seemed a little scattered. I was like, why are you asking me all these questions? It seemed like, is he going to be selling his own product? Lo and behold, 2 weeks later, he starts to promote his own hair loss supplement. And it was
mm,
because there's a very interesting pointed question. And there's another guy, very famous biohacker, who
yeah,
I've spoken with, who's now, he basically told on his Instagram, he said that finasteride permanently neuters up to, did he say 5% of men who use it? I couldn't even believe he would put that out there. And then within 2 months, he's selling his own hair loss supplement. So, I mean, you got to take things with a grain of salt, people.
yeah. I think that's the biggest point. Just try. and do the research yourself because it's free. It's literally you can just search it on Google. Like there's no barrier to it. Anyone can go and find it. You don't have to do a medical degree. Like obviously some of the studies can be quite confusing if you don't understand the language, but even if you just read the basic abstract at the top and then, maybe go to a doctor, maybe not a doctor, but
Look,
I,
I'm gonna say this for you. I would say, and this is not, we're not promoting anything. You don't pay any money to be a trusted content creator. I'm not making
no,
any money off of you. And that's the way that we work. The American Hair Loss Association is a nonprofit organization, period. 100% of the people that are working with us are on a volunteer basis. I don't draw a salary. For 25 years, I've never drawn a salary from the American Hair Loss Association. I can draw a salary legally as a director. I could easy $150,000. That would be like a low salary, but I choose
mm,
not to because I want this to be completely uncorrupted. So that's what I want the Trusted Content Creator Program to be as well. These
yeah,
people should do their own due diligence, but at the very least, if you see that someone's a trusted content creator, if they're carrying that seal, if they're talking about it on their social media, at the very least, you know that they're vetted and they're
yeah,
providing you with accurate information. Now, the organization can't support everything that these content creators may be affiliated with, but the basic information we can because
yeah.
you guys are telling the truth. And that's why we gave you that seal, brother.
Nice one. Appreciate that, Spencer. Appreciate it. And anything that I talk about, it'll be, backed by good studies, not just crappy studies. And if I'm talking about any treatment and promoting it in any sense, I will be using it myself. Like, I'm not going to be talking about stuff if I'm not using it. And that's
Yeah.
just the facts.
And the same
Um,
goes for hair transplant surgery. I mean, I know that you know that it's a very something to be very cautious about, and
yeah,
it's not something that's easily, it's not something that someone should just do because they want a perfect head of hair.
no. Yeah, well, I'll just say, guys, thank you. Big thank you to Spencer for coming on. I
Oh,
really
my pleasure,
appreciate it.
brother.
And it's great to just hear, you know, so many insights from someone who's been in this industry, in this community for so long and helped a lot of people as well. So make sure you leave some nice positive comments to Spencer in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all the good
Yeah.
stuff. And I'll
We'll
see you in the next
see.
video.
We'll see. All right, brother. Take it easy.